Good afternoon, everyone. This is the 17th meeting of the Community and Protective Services Committee. We're here in the council chambers. All members of the committee are present, with Mayor Morgan being absent. The City of London is situated on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabeg, Haudenosaunee, and Lenape and Attawadden. We honor and respect the history, language, and the culture of the diverse Indigenous people who call this territory home. The City of London is currently home to many First Nation, Métis, and Inuit today. As representatives of the people of the City of London, we are grateful to have the opportunity to work and live in this territory. The City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternate formats and communication supports for meetings upon request. To make a request specific to this meeting, please contact cpsc@london.ca or 519-661-2489, extension 2425. I now look to committee for disclosures of pecuniary interest, noting that we are working off the added agenda today, with the only revision being a date on the first page of item 2.3. So nothing else has been added, just one minor clerical change with a date. So looking to the committee to see if there's any disclosures of pecuniary interest. Seeing none, on our consent items, we have 2.1 through to 2.7. Looking to see if anyone would like anything pulled in order to vote separate or have alternate motions. If it's going to be a longer discussion, they can still just live on consent and we'll take the time we need. Councillor Stevenson, something you'd like pulled?
2.4, please.
Okay. So that leaves us 2.1 to 2.3 and 2.5 to 2.7. Okay, looking for a mover and a seconder of consent items. Moved by Councillor Ferrer to put on the floor, seconded by Councillor Rahman. Starting my speakers list for any of those items excluding 2.4. No one else has their hands up, so Councillor Ferrer, we'll start with you, and I'm aware that Councillor Rahman has questions as well. Councillor Ferrer. Can somebody just see if the mics? There we go. Perfect.
Thank you, through you. I did want to go to staff about the Building Safer Communities Fund grant program. I just want to see if we could get a brief description. I do know that this is a pretty good initiative funded by the federal government, so no municipal tax levy or municipal funds at all. So I just want to know if we could get a quick overview on that.
Okay, thank you. So that was item 2.6 for questions. And Councillor Ferrer, you're just a little bit faint, so maybe just move the microphone or be louder next time. Okay, to staff, please.
Thank you, and through the chair, we're happy to answer the question. You're right, this is the Building Safer Communities Fund, is through the federal government and Public Safety Canada, and the City of London has approximately $2.7 million in federal funding that we will allocate over the next 3 years to the 6 successful organizations identified in this report. And these organizations are looking at targeting young people. I believe my staff just told me the projects will directly serve approximately 2,370 high-risk youth annually that are targeted to prevention, intervention, and transformational projects that will address gun and gang violence in London.
A follow-up, Councillor Ferrer?
No follow-ups. I appreciate that. I think this is a great initiative, and I'm pretty excited to see what comes out of it. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rahman.
Thank you, and through you. I actually wanted to start with the property standards related demolition report. And I'm just wondering, I know that we've seen these, I believe we've seen these before. Yeah, I believe we've seen these before, but not these properties, but different properties. I just wanted to get an idea of timeline around and next steps as it relates to the recommendation.
Through the chair.
Just 1 second, Mr. Katulik. Do you need information on how long it took these to get here, the process to get here as well? Okay.
Thank you.
Just, it is, we see them, it's a legal process. Mr. Katulik, if you just outline how it gets to be here, and then the councillor's questions of where we go from here. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair, these are all in response to property standard orders that were issued this past summer. And it takes approximately 2 to 3 months for the demolition process to work its way through. We do a designated substance survey to identify any hazardous materials, and that goes to the demolition contractor to ensure that they demolish the properties in a safe fashion.
Thank you. Just to follow up, so how long would it take for these properties to then be actually demolished? Like, are we talking about next summer? Are we talking about sooner?
Mr. Katolik?
Through the chair, it'll take about 2 to 3 months because these are not in any historic areas. So we do a designated substance survey first. That takes about a month. And then 2 to 3 months after that for the demolition process. But it all depends on the contractor's schedule as well.
Okay, Counselor?
Thank you. And my next question is actually related to the Water and Parks report. So I know that this report came about from communication from a previous counselor, and it was more with respect to dog parks, I believe, at the time that the report was put forward. And I noticed that in the report, it doesn't, it basically says that for the master parks plan, that's when we'll really take a look, park by park and really determine what we're able to do. Right now, we don't have any off-leash dog parks that have water. Would we be considering those on a priority basis? And from the initial request, I believe it was because of a desire to have water in dog parks. So I just wonder how we're addressing that if the only way that we're addressing it is through this report and it's not recommending it.
Mr. Yeoman, realizing this report did come, as the counselor said, from the prior council and
Yes.
our desire to look at we started off absolutely with water for dogs, and then it was like, well, what about everybody having access to water? So, Mr. Yeoman, if you want to give some background or anything that you think might be helpful for the counselors, please do.
Thank you through you, Madam Chair. So the report is fairly comprehensive. The resolution is in the report, and as the councillor indicated, it did start off fairly tight, and it did expand to looking at the system more comprehensively, which is what we brought before you here. We have noted that there are 36 parks that we do think could accommodate it, and we've articulated the different ranges of parks there. Yes, dog parks are obviously something we get a lot of feedback on quite a bit. We do not have funding that's available right now for the installation for dog parks, though, and so that's why we're recommending it to be part of the Parks and Rec Master Plan, where we can set the priorities, we can work with the community through the consultation that will be involved in that, and come back to council with the suite of service improvements that we're anticipating through the Parks and Rec Master Plan update that's starting next year.
Counselor Rahman?
Thank you. I think that when I was reading this report, I thought this is a balanced approach to addressing a need. However, one of the things I struggled with this report is how we're viewing this from an equity perspective as well. And I'm just wondering, outside of this report, when it's thought through in terms of the Parks Master Plan, how will that play in? Access to water is so important. We have to find ways to make it as accessible as possible to people. How does this report and the Parks Master Plan really entertain that? And I know there's a cost here, but I think it is in line with our strategic plan. So I'm trying to wrap my head around that a little bit more.
Mr. Yeoman?
Through the chair, and I appreciate you raising that, Councillor, because the last Parks and Rec Master Plan did begin to look more at equity and inclusion matters at that time. Since then, we have evolved, of course, as a corporation, as a community with the equity tool and the considerations that we have. It will be a very important part of the next master plan update, and those lenses will be applied and will be definitely informing the recommendations that will be before you.
Counselor? Okay, Counselor Pribble? And just Counselor Trosa, welcome to committee, and everything else is on the floor right now with the exception of 2.4. Counselor Pribble.
Thank you. And through the chair to the staff, it's regarding the 2.5, the property standards related demolitions. I wanted to ask you, in terms of the code, property standards order, is it planned to revisit this? Because, for example, in my area, I have a couple of houses that are kind of deteriorating really fast, and it's actually a danger. There are kids around playing, etc. Are we planning to kind of revisit this and see if this order is kind of, I guess the right word, strict enough, or that we can move on faster with such initiatives?
Mr. Katolik?
Through the chair, through the Building Code Act, we have various enforcement tools that we can use. One of them is laying AMPs, administrative monetary penalties, and we do that. We also have the ability to repair properties, and in certain situations, we do that as well. The 4 properties in this report are likely beyond their economic life to do any repairs. So, and I know that I could have a sidebar conversation about the properties you're talking about. Those properties, we could be doing other enforcement actions that do not involve demolitions, because they do have some economic life still within those buildings. It's just that the property owners are not adhering to the property standards bylaw.
Councilor Pribble?
Just to follow up, I totally agree that we are doing the steps, and I totally agree that the owners are not responding to us. The question is it a time for us to introduce additional tools so we can move on faster and have the owners respond to us or make the decision for them?
Mr. Katolik?
Through the chair, the property standards bylaw, the jurisdiction comes under the Building Code Act. And I believe that in Ontario, there are enough necessary tools to seek compliance. One of them is issuing or administrative monetary penalties. Others involve fees to property owners. And in my experience, when there's property owners that ignore our orders, as soon as there is a fee associated, a monetary penalty associated with the order, or an administrative penalty issued, they start taking action. With respect to demolitions, our experience is every time we come to this committee and then council with properties that we're ordering for demolition, when the property owners get that resolution of council, at times that's the first time they make contact with the municipality and take it upon themselves to demolish the properties. And then the properties are then sold, or that owner improves the property by building new on that vacant property.
Councilor Pribble?
Last follow-up, the Provincial Building Code Act, do we have the power in terms of municipality to make a bylaw that would be more stricter, or do we have to play by the provincial one?
Mr. Katolik?
Through the chair, the jurisdiction comes under the Building Code Act, and I believe that the enforcement tools under the Building Code Act are adequate because each property is unique in its level of non-compliance with the property standards bylaw.
Councilor Pribble, you're satisfied for now?
No more questions, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I do have one question on this, just as we're on the same one. It's for Mr. Katolik. I see within the report that proactive inspection fees and any actions regarding securing the building are invoiced to the property owners. Do you know if this is a full cost recovery that they get invoiced back, or is it just set maximums that we can bill as per legislation?
Through the chair, it's a full cost recovery for any actions taken. The cost of our inspection fees are set under the fees and charges bylaw at $125 per officer per hour.
Thank you for that clarification. Councilor Trousseau, you had a question?
Yes, I do, and thank you for letting me participate in your meeting as a guest, and through the chair. I have some very, very serious concerns that the enforcement orders are not being applied consistently, that they're not being applied with enough, well, I'd like to see them applied a little stricter. And I think even though this comes under the jurisdiction of the Building Act, the municipality under Section 10, Subdivision 2 of the Municipal Act has a number of bylaw powers that it could use, including health, safety, environment. I won't read them verbatim, but I think that the Councilor Pribble asked a very, very important question. And I think in my view, I would like to see a little bit more critical thought given to how you would respond to Councilor Pribble's question, because I think the answer is yes, separate and apart from the Building Codes Act, which is provincial, we do have a variety of tools that we have under municipal jurisdiction. Does the fact that there's a Building Codes Act sort of totally preempt any other enforcement activities?
Okay, I'll take that as a question for Mr. Katolik or Mr. Mathers, or both of you.
I'll just begin through the chair. So as far as the property standards bylaw, that's a municipal bylaw. That's something that's within council's purview to review and to make changes to. I'd be very interested to know, and not in this format, but just some of the issues that are happening. I think there's probably some specific ones out there that we can look at how we address those more proactively. So I'm happy to meet with the two councilors and try to understand that, to ensure that we, because we always do take a balanced approach. Ideally, we can have approach where people will rectify those situations in a timely way, and when they don't, then that's where we have to come up with some more punitive measures. And there's a bit of a balance in applying those measures, but if the balance isn't being struck appropriately, then I'd like to have a little bit more conversation on those specific properties, and then bring something back to council if that's appropriate.
Counselor?
Thank you, and I will take you up. I will take you up on that. Now, my next question is, once a building has been identified as derelict or not in substantial compliance with your codes, what happens progressively to make sure that it does not get to the point where it deteriorates and deteriorates and needs to be demolished?
Mr. Katolik?
Yes, through the chair, the properties that we're dealing with, we do not proactively identify those. They come to us as complaints likely from neighbors. Also, another source of complaints are real estate agents that are attempting to sell properties down the street. So we assess the violations, we issue orders, and in these cases, orders are totally ignored. So we could lay charges. This could end up in court. It could sit in the court docket for a year and a half. Our preference is to take proactive actions because of the neglect of the property owners and demolish the properties, because each property is unique in its own way of being in compliance with the Property Standards Bylaw, which is under the Building Code Act. And the Building Code Act allows the municipality to either repair the property or demolish the property. And because of the uniqueness of the violations, the recommendations we're making is to demolish these 4 properties.
Counselor?
Thank you. I know in this case it's gotten to the point there has been such widespread neglect that you now have to demolish. My specific question is, what can be done to improve the process so it does not get to the point where you have to demolish it? For example, once you have a violation that's not being addressed, don't you have the authority to fix it, to do the repairs, and put that on the tax bill?
Yes, through the chair, we do have that authority, and we do use that authority. However, in these 4 circumstances, it does not make economic sense to fix a roof on a building when the inside of the building is not worth fixing. So in these 4 circumstances, we are recommending demolition. In other situations, we do repair properties. We do not need to come to council for approval for those repairs because it is an administrative and operational decision.
Yes, I'm not
Sorry,
specifically.
through the chair, please.
Through the chair, of course. I'm not talking about these 4 properties. I'm talking about your general policies. Why do we let it get to the point where we have to consider demolition when, once you know that there are violations that are not being remedied, why do you not take a more aggressive stand with the
Counselor?
property owner?
As you've also stated that your questions are not in actual relation to the items before us today in these properties, and staff have said they'll meet with you behind the scenes. I do respect that it is a complicated process with some tools of the make safe that they can do, and the issues with trying to find the actual property owners, especially if it's gone to estate matters, making sure the municipality can reclaim its money. So if you just please keep your questions to the
Yes,
4 properties before us.
I'll rephrase that through the chair. In these cases, understanding that what's done is done, how did it get to the point where we have to be looking at a demolition? Why were we not using progressive remedies throughout?
Through the chair.
Sorry,
and
yep, Mr. Mathers had his hand up too, so whoever, sorry.
I'll just start. So just going back to how we flag these properties. So we don't have a proactive program to go out and identify properties. If we did have something like that, or even had a better way of advertising to folks that there's an opportunity that if you see a property in your house, on your street that's having issues, that come to us and we can help you rectify that. So there's maybe a couple different ways that we can look at it. Right now, we're just complaint-based. So it's very likely that you're not going to get complaints until you see shingles falling off and holes in roofs. So that's one likelihood. But there might be other remedies that we can consider, but that's what our current policies conclude.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you very much. And I appreciate the latitude you've given me. Just to say, I think we need to be doing a better job so we don't implicitly encourage owners to engage in this type of neglect, because it may be really what they want is the demolition order.
Through the chair,
Mr. Katolik?
a property owner does have the right to demolish the property without coming through council, unless, of course, it is a historic property. So these are all very good questions, but I think some of these questions could be better directed at the property owners, asking them why are they letting their properties not comply with the property standards bylaw. It is really the neglect of the property owners that are leading to the proactive approach that we're taking to demolish these properties.
One follow-up question then. to
Is
the
it
chair.
actually a question? Like, I don't want to get too much back and forth
No, this
as
is
you're
a-
also a
this
visiting
is a-
counselor.
This is a question that's based on what you just said. Fair enough. How would a ward counselor or a neighbor or a neighborhood association ascertain the identity and whereabouts and contact information of the property owners so they could do exactly what you just said?
Mr. Katolik?
Through the chair, we always suggest when property owners have issues within their neighborhood, usually the common sense first step is to try to contact that property owner to try to solve it without getting city interaction. So there are ways finding out who owns properties. Simply leaving a letter in the mailbox sometimes will resolve a problem without any city interaction.
Okay, thank you. No,
More, through the chair, more specifically.
no. This is not in relation to these 4 items before us. This is a consent item, and this is more of an intricate back and forth with staff, as I truly recognize that sometimes the property owners are not even on that property and nobody's actually in it. Looking to committee members to see if there's anything else on the consent items 2.1 to 2.3 or 2.5 to 2.7. Okay, nothing from my left. Looking this way, seeing nothing. Calling the question on 2.1 to 2.3, everything excluding 2.4, as Councillor Rahman would coach me.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Okay. Thank you. That leaves us item 2.4, being the Housing Collaborative Initiative follow-up and next steps. Looking to committee as it was pulled, I'm not sure if you have alternate wording from anyone on committee. If so, I would like that tabled sooner just to phrase our conversation, or if it's a matter that we just would maybe like to vote a different way on this one. Staff is also prepared with an intro on this one if we would like to receive it, just to frame the conversation. Okay, Mr. Fehlberg is our go-to on this one. We would like you to frame this conversation. I know it's a complicated, long-standing, intricate one. So I will have more leeway on this one with questions as we go, because it's technical. I've also asked Mr. Fehlberg to use as few acronyms as possible, as there is many within the industry, and to keep us on track. Mr. Fehlberg?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just checking my notes to make sure there's no acronyms, and I think we're good. So last fall, when I took on the municipal housing portfolio, it was obviously a very complex portfolio. Almost every project, every initiative that we work on relies on us stacking funding from the province, the federal government, or the city as well. Each subsequent agreement is then intertwined with another one that in some cases relies on the terms of some of those other agreements that we've also entered into. And additionally, with each project, we need to try and understand the decision-making at the time and how the context may have changed through regulation, policy updates, or leadership changes. So as you know, in May, following the question posed by local media, we brought forward a preliminary report to identify a gap in reporting and deliverables for a project that has been around since 2014. At the time, there were many questions still to be answered on what happened and what we'd received from the project. The report tonight provides both an account of what happened to get us here and proposes some next steps for civic administration to pursue and deliver on our service obligations to the tenants and housing providers, with the goal of providing service to those living in housing that can't afford an open market rent. In the case of this initiative, based on this review, this project is following that very complex agreement arrangement that's very typical in the housing space. Because of that, we can't just look at the costs without measuring the contractual obligations and the needs of the sector. Before Mr. Mathers and I can take some questions this evening, I'd like to also provide a bit of clarity on the recommendations, what they mean, as it seems that there may be an opportunity for them to be misinterpreted. On the recommendation to close out obligations, we're proposing to work with our legal counsel and the respective counsels of our agreement partners to identify the conditions to complete our contractual obligations. This does not mean that the expenditures would cease immediately. It would mean that we would assess the conditions and then we would work towards closing out the contracts in 2024. If there are mutual conditions to exit that the parties can agree on, then we would take subsequent action to exit it sooner. This work has not started yet. On the recommendation to report back, this will definitely take some time for us to do correctly and in alignment with our project management best practices. To do this well, we need to ensure that we understand our business needs and those of the housing providers. A big part of our project planning will be to identify internal resources needed and the appropriate levels of change management to bring in a new software to support our work. And that is regardless of whether it's this software or another software. With that, Madam Chair, I'll turn it over to you and take any questions from the committee.
Okay, thank you. So looking to committee, they're happy to give more feedback, realizing LMCH is aware of this, as are our fellow councilors who serve on the board, but there's also a large continuum of other housing providers, as Mr. Felberg had mentioned, that we need to reach out to. So looking to see if you had a specific question, if you were referencing something within the document, please just mention the page to help frame the conversation if you maybe remember where you read it. Mr. Felberg, something to add?
Just if I could, Madam Chair, could you reference the section of the report rather than the page? I don't have the same agenda package you do.
There you have it. If we know what section we're questioning, we will start there, and I will start my speakers list. I am timing us just to make sure that we all share the space and some questions. Councillor Ferreira will start us off.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. So I do appreciate the clarification on what the directions are or what is being requested by staff here of closing out the financial obligations rather than closing out, I guess, the whole thing. I guess my first question would be is with respect to the other municipalities, and I do see, I think I saw York is pulled out last year. But I just wanted to know if there's been any conversation with the other municipalities, part of the agreement, on our intention to close out the financial obligation.
Mr. Felberg?
Through you, Madam Chair. So if you look in section 2.7 of the report where it says governance group update, there is a reference to an MOU between the different municipalities and the software developer. So what the consortium is doing, so the consortium is that group of 8 municipalities now minus York. The governance group is the group that provides governance over the consortium. And that group, that governance group of the consortium, is looking to close out the contractual obligations. So we're working with the software developer to establish the expectations for both sides of the table so that we can get through and complete the actual software development and close out that contract with the developer. And that's intended for sometime in 2024.
Councillor Ferreira?
Thank you for that. Through you. So if we were to be closing out the financial obligation, just to confirm, with the products that I do see that have already been available as modules, I think I saw the waitlist module and the tenant supplement module, would those still be within the property of the city? Would we still be able to utilize those if we choose to?
Mr. Felberg?
Through you, Madam Chair, my understanding is that if we were to exit the consortium agreement, we would not have the direct entitlement to those modules anymore. So then we would go to open market if we were to go out and search for another software.
Councillor Ferreira?
Thank you for that. Okay, so I guess with respect to like the integrated housing software, and I did see some mentions of the Yardi system, and that is a system that we're currently using. I just wanted to know, is the intention, or is there a possibility moving forward that we would be using the RD system across, across everything that we're doing?
Mr. Felberg?
Through you, Madam Chair. So the Yardi system is something that our Housing Access Center is using right now. There are some modules available that could expand the portfolio of that particular software. What we're proposing through our next steps here is, based on our current business requirements and current needs, is to go out and ensure that there is no other software out there, or identify the software that best suits those business requirements and business needs for the city. And then at that point, we'd come back to this committee, we would identify what the project plan is, and then we would take next steps to implement.
Counselor?
Thank you. Those will be my questions for now, but I probably just hold my time. I'll probably be asking more.
Okay, you're at 1:08, just to let you know. Counselor Stevenson?
Thank you. My question, the first one is around 2.3, where it talks about the expenses, and I'm wondering what the budget was. We're seeing what the totals are, but I'm wondering what the budget was.
Okay, Mr. Felberg, if was different budget updates that come throughout the way, feel free to answer as comprehensively as possible.
Certainly, and through you, Madam Chair. So there was a budget originally for the software development, and that was shared amongst the consortium. And London's share of that was that $228,000 that you see in the report. As for the implementation, I am not aware of a specific number that was approved at the beginning. It was based on the activities in order to connect back to the project through the HCI agreement back to through the governance group and with the software developer.
Counselor?
So I'm not sure where the funding came from for all of this, if we didn't have a budget to start with.
Mr. Felberg?
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. As you indicated, there would be annual updates where we would talk about the expenditures that we're expecting. We have the contracts that we have in place with the HCI coordinator, and those would have been updated through our annual budget updates, and that's where the budgets would have been aligned based on that contract.
Counselor Stevenson?
I'm not sure I follow, so there was an additional budget request each year to cover the extra?
Mr. Felberg, if this was like wrapped into operating somehow, or if it was just a set reserve fund that it come out of, or if perhaps we're looking for like the source of funding of where it was drawn down from? If we don't have a clear answer today, we could always make sure staff comes back with that for council.
Madam Chair, if you'd indulge me, I'd like to take that back and assess the various budget asks over the year and be able to bring that back.
Councillor, you're satisfied that, and that'll be provided in writing in advance of council, just for we could have a chance to see it? Okay, thank you. We just need your mic, Mr. Felberg.
Thank you. And I was wondering if we could hear from IT as to what their participation has been in since 2014?
Mr. Mathers?
Through the chair, and we do try to highlight this, that IT has not been involved in this to any kind of measurable degree. That's one reason why we're trying to take this back through appropriate project management process, because they did not have a significant coordination of any of the work here. So that was one of the things that we've highlighted in this report, in the previous report, that's one of the reasons why we've gotten to the process that's over 10 years and we still not have a deliverable product.
Councillor Stevenson?
Thank you. I guess I'm just wondering, when you say appropriate project management, I'm wondering, like, what went wrong in these 7 or 8 years that there's no report back to council, there's all this money on a consultant without any, like, just, can you tell us what went wrong and how we're going to fix it so it doesn't happen again?
So that would be an opportunities for improvement for process?
Through you, Madam Chair. So in a typical project, what we would do is we would go out and we would look for, we would establish what it is we need. Then we would go out, look for a particular, we would establish our business requirements, we would establish our business readiness. So those are different steps within the project planning in order for us to prepare for execution. In this particular project, given the consortium came together to identify a customized piece of software designed by service managers for service managers to operate under the Housing Services Act. We went out and procured and identified a software, started building a software. We then skipped 2 or 3 steps. We skipped the business readiness step and then the project planning step and went straight to the execution. And so where the gap is that we have in our best management project management best practices is those 2 steps. And that's what we're proposing to do here today. We're going to take a step back. We're going to go out, assess that there is no other software out there that can provide or identify what software it is that we need, and then undertake the proper business readiness and project planning so that we can get to an implementation stage and then actually deliver on a software that will suit and be able to provide service to our housing providers, tenants, and the city.
Thank you. Counselor?
Thank you. And I know there were no reports to council, but what activities like oversight or project management would happen in that 8-year gap? Because like who was overseeing it and what kind of discussions were happening?
Would this also be a who of what department or where it fell versus maybe a specific individual? As if it's an individual, we need to go on camera. To staff?
Through the chair, there has been a lot of change over this last 10 years. We're also trying to untangle all of that work at the same time as trying to reestablish housing development in the City of London. So if that's something that we'd like to have more work on, we can do that. However, we've really focused on how we're going to move forward, how we're going to make sure that we actually make this into a tenable project. But the folks that are still in the city right now weren't involved at that time to be able to give a blow-by-blow of what happened. So at this point, we've just focused on the next steps and how we could proceed.
Okay. Thank you. I'm also collecting more people from my speakers list, so looking to see if anyone else would like a first turn before I go back to Councillor Ferreira. Councillor Rahman?
Thank you, and through you. Thank you for the report. I appreciated the timeline, especially because I think it helped to better understand or get a sense of where some of the decision points were, and perhaps take a look at where maybe we could have looked at other options to change course as well. Looking at 2020, where project coordination consulting costs increased, at the time when those costs were increasing, we were still at the point where it seems like we didn't have a lot in hand yet. And I'm just wondering how, if we were to look back at it, how might we have potentially looked at it differently, being that we were being asked for a cost increase, but we were not getting any real deliverables at that point.
Okay. Mr. Felberg?
Through you, Madam Chair. So I don't think it's necessarily fair to say that there wasn't anything provided. So if you go to the table 1 and 2.2, you'll see that there are a number of deliverables that were provided. Early in the project, the back-end system was created, it was developed, and there was a lot of work on that. After that, what we had was a series of a couple of the modules that were developed in 2018, so the wait list and the rent supplement module were created as well. We were also able to, the applicant portal was available in 2019. There were some decisions made, as I understand it, based on looking at some of the project documentation, that the City of London wanted to have a full package available to us to implement at the time. So given that some of the modules were in process of being worked on and being developed, the city made a decision that we wanted to have the entire thing so that we could provide service to the housing providers, ourselves, and the tenants all at once. So some of those project decisions were made, and additionally, what I would also offer is that there is incredibly detailed, incredibly valuable information that is not throwaway that the consultant has provided us. Assuming that we can assuming that this software is the software that we developed through or identify as the product that we want to implement, All of that information could be used for us as we move forward to an execution. So there's testing requirements, there's test cases that have been developed. There's a significant amount of information and project data that's available to us and that has been provided by our consultant.
Counselor?
Thank you. Just to follow up. So thank you. I appreciate that. Just a comment, I'm supportive of the recommendations that are in front of us, as these are kind of the only things that we have as a governance body to really work with. I think at this point, it's critical that we find a way forward so that we have the ability to manage this data appropriately. However, I'm sure there are other thoughts and considerations that need to be made on the operational side. And so I'm sure that will be something that will be happening. But on the governance side, this is, I think, what we can do with the information that we've been given.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Counselor Pribble first for first comments, and then Counselor Ferreira.
Thank you, and through the chair, and actually I see our city manager here, and I actually have a question for her. What internal procedures and controls have been or can be introduced so we minimize this issue and potential losses to the corporation? Thank you.
Welcome, Ms. Livingston, to committee. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess the first thing I'd like to say is that when HCI was introduced a number of years ago, we didn't have in place the procedures and controls that we do today. And I'm going to walk through a number of that we have in place. I would also like to note that once the issues with HCI were discovered a few months ago, we also undertook an enterprise-wide review to ensure that we had no other legacy projects like this. And based on that review, we do not. So there's a number of internal procedures and controls and processes that we have in place to try and enhance our management practices and also minimize or eliminate any issues or losses. So I'm going to go through a number of them, and they include adoption of best practices. So all of our City of London technology projects are now aligned with the best practices of the Project Management Institute, and according to our folks, the PMI is the International Authority on Project Management, so we follow those standards. We also have much stronger governance in place in that all City of London technology projects are governed and reviewed and prioritized by an interdepartmental committee that we call the Technology Investment Strategy Committee. So there isn't any project that goes through the organization that doesn't go through that committee and receive approval, and then it is signed off by the senior leadership team. All of our City of London technology projects are monitored and reported on a weekly basis, and that helps us to decrease the probability of unexpected project outcomes. We also have very clear resource management expectations for both internal and external resources, and on a weekly basis, those external vendors are reviewed by our project managers in accordance with the technology project plan. We have formal processes in place to manage change in scope, schedule, resources, and this is a standard approach through our technology projects now. As well, we have a focus on training and capacity building so that we can strengthen our project management skills. I'm going to talk about that again in a second. You will also be aware, if you've looked at our audit committee agenda, that we have recently undertaken a vendor management internal audit, and there are a number of recommendations through that audit that can assist us in terms of managing how we manage vendors that we will benefit from, that will assist with a problem like this. As well, we have an initiative underway across the organization that we call organizational capabilities, where we identify a number of core competencies that we expect to have across the organization, and project management is one of those. This will allow us to leverage expertise and ensure consistency on how we manage projects across the organization. So that work is currently underway. And finally, the last part of our strategy is we have a regular review, annual review of our goods and services policy. And that can also assist us in terms of ensuring that if there are things we need to address on how we procure, that we do that. And our current review is being undertaken by a third party. So if there's any recommendations there that could assist us, then we would be implementing those as well. So I just want to close by saying, when we started with HCI, things were very different than what they are today, and we do have a number of controls in place today.
Okay, thank you for that update of the processes that we were working on to do better and have been doing better going forward, and this being the only legacy project that we found that was outstanding. Councillor Pribble?
Thank you. Just to follow up, and thank you for these. And I think that those are great actions and initiatives to control to improve our internal controls. One thing is, and I think I'm quite sure you mentioned it, but I'm very satisfied. Thank you very much.
Okay. For those who are joining us virtually and in chambers. Councillor Ferreira, please proceed.
Thank you, through you. I do appreciate what the city manager has told us, and just moving forward on how we can mitigate issues like this. You know, it will happen to the best of us, especially when you're doing the amount of business that the city is doing. I did want to speak back to the deliverables and what the modules that have been created. I just wanted to know, the modules themselves, like I understand that I did read in the report that the modules may not apply directly to the landscape that we're in right now. But I did want, and I did also see that there are other municipalities using some of the modules. I see the waitlist modules being used by Waterloo and Hamilton. So from what my assumption is, and after reading this report, we're not using any of the modules from HCI currently. Okay, I see a shaking of the head there from Mr. Fehlberg. So I'll just take that as an answer. I appreciate that. I would like to see if we can mitigate our costs a little bit more than the report. And I understand that this is a consortium and there's probably a whole bunch of different stipulations within the agreement, but I wanted to know, is there any way that we could, especially considering we paid, I think, 1.2 million, which is more than half of the total amount, is there any way that there could be some discussion with the other municipalities within the agreement to pull the modules that have already been completed now and to bring it back within the city? Because ultimately it would be code. And I just want to know if that's a possibility that we could take it back and have our ITS department in-house when we move forward, and if there's any possible development of that, to use that code that's already been built moving forward, just so we can reduce the work that we have to put into this.
Okay. Thank you. To staff?
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. So based on all the information that the city manager just provided on all the different project steps that we need to take, if we were to kind of cut around the process and take other steps, we could end up in the same space we are today. I think ideally what the best approach for us to do is to go back, assess our business readiness, assess our business requirements, make sure that the software is going to provide us what we need to provide, then take steps to come back to this committee, identify the resources that are required, identify the costs for us to implement, and then the committee can make a decision on what we do with our next steps.
Okay. And just for a timeline for when you come back, when are we anticipating this comes back? End of 2024 or?
To you, Madam Chair, ideally, if we're doing it well and we're able to, the plan is to do it in 2024. But what we need to do is make sure that we properly cost it, properly resource it. We need to discuss with the other housing providers, the 63 social housing providers, ensure that they're getting what they need in order to run their business. And then we'll come back to this committee with a recommendation.
Okay. So we'll assume late next year that we'll see us back to finish the conversation. Councillor Ferreira, anything to follow up on that?
Thank you. Just one follow-up. Thank you for that answer. The one thing that I feel like we really lost here, obviously on top of the money and the time, would be also that integration piece with the other service managers and the sharing of data and communication. From what I know, you build or use from a third party, would there be integration?
Can align with what the other service managers are doing around the province. That's essentially why this software was put together. It was a way for us to align with other service managers around the province, to create a consistent reporting tool so that all of those service managers would be able to report back to the province in the same way with the same information, and then you can start comparing apples to apples.
Counselor?
Thank you. So just for the sharing part, I don't know if we would need to do that, but just to confirm, moving forward, there would still be, depending on the information, if we need to, if it's within our benefit and individuals that we're serving their benefit, there would be kind of some data sharing just so we can have some coordination.
To staff?
Through you, Madam Chair, that's the intention of this type of software, yes.
Counselor, are you satisfied?
Yeah, that's it. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Okay. I believe Counselor Stevenson was next.
Thank you. I'm referring to 2.5, the local cost sharing, and I wonder if you could tell us more about that and when the most recent cost sharing arrangement agreement would have been.
Mr. Felberg?
Through you, Madam Chair. So this is really the biggest and most complex part of this entire project. So we have the consortium agreement where we went out and identified a software developer, and we have a contract between the consortium and the software developer. Within that consortium agreement, they also identify the need for a project manager and then somebody to work on the technical components of the software development. In 2015, LMCH and the city both had a need to implement software. LMCH was doing something different, and we entered into a shared service agreement with LMCH in 2015. That work finished sometime in 2016, and then in 2017, we entered into, we carried on that shared service agreement with LMCH, working with that same consultant who is providing us with the city staffer for the consortium agreement. So I don't, it's the cost sharing that we have with the, through the consortium agreement, it identified that we would then share costs for that project manager and the consulting work for the consortium agreement. I think I'm probably confusing you a little bit more, but that is really where the complexity comes in. It's this additional agreement with the this shared service agreement with LMCH that is really causing some of that complication.
Counselor Stevenson?
Thank you. I guess my confusion is I'm looking at an MOU dated January 16th, 2023. That outlines all of the costs and the breakdowns by city and everything. So if we were signing one in January of 2023, or actually issuing it, like at that time, what was the plan, you know, and how, you know, how often was this looked at? Because my understanding was that the consultant, there was a new contract every 2 years. My understanding also is that the last time we signed one was January of 2023. So there was a recent point, a decision point. And so I'd love to know more about that. Like what were we thinking at that time?
Okay, to staff?
Through you, Madam Chair. So in January 2023, that cost sharing component of the consortium agreement, York Region was officially out of the consortium at that point. So what that required was that the consortium reallocated cost amongst the 7 municipalities as opposed to the 8. So that MOU or that document that you're looking at really reflects what that new sharing of cost is as the resource that's required under the HCI. So it's independent of that that LMCH shared services agreement. However, the LMCH shared services agreement was our agreement with our consultant who is also providing the service back to the HCI.
Counselor?
Yeah, so, but again, my question is, we re-entered agreements in early 2023, and now all of a sudden we're saying it's not good to go forward, which is fine, but I'm wondering why the change? Why did we move forward with a multi-year commitment in January, and then now we're saying out? Like what has been the change?
Do we just need to know what what section what page or section number?
It is the 2.5, the
2.5.
cost sharing.
Okay, thank you. To staff?
So that cost sharing that we're referring to from 2023, that is the cost sharing of the costs within the consortium agreement. So there's a consortium agreement, requires cost sharing between the member municipalities. That agreement, we're not recommending at this point that we exit that agreement necessarily. We want to close out the development of the software. So that cost sharing that we're talking about, that document that you're looking at, reflects what's required under the consortium agreement for us to deliver on the software.
Would it be possible to get the copy of the the MOU, the cost sharing agreement, and the last consultant contract, even in a confidential envelope before council?
Yeah, just checking with staff to see if that's available to us as our property and if it could be made available. Looking to legal. Sorry, we're going to need a microphone just for it's on the record.
Sorry, I'll pop up here.
Sorry, and introduce yourself as well.
I will. Is that on?
Mr. Feldberg, you need to turn your mic off or we can share.
It's your fault. It's Kelly Daughtry from Legal, and I don't know, I have not reviewed all of these agreements. So it would probably be prudent if I said we would need to review it from Legal to ensure that there's no concerns about disclosing it, given it would also contain information, I would assume, of other municipalities as well. So we'd be happy to do that in Legal and report back on that by council.
Okay, Mr. Feldberg, anything to add?
Madam Chair, I'd be happy to meet with the councillor one-on-one and take her through the agreement. It might help to ask some really pointed questions about some of the things that are going on, and I can try and explain it a little bit differently.
Perfect. I did take that opportunity as well before committee, just knowing it was intricate to try and help facilitate the conversation. So it was worthwhile, though still convoluted. Councillor Stevenson?
In addition to getting that before council, because I think all of the councillors should be able to access that as well. The other question is on page section 2.3, it says civic administration at the very bottom. It says civic administration is still working with the governance group to validate all amounts owing from other municipalities, ensure that they've been invoiced and collected. So I was wondering if somebody could comment to that, like how often were we billing the other municipalities, and how long before we would know that validation of all the amounts?
To Mr. Feldberg or Mr. Mathers?
Through you, Madam Chair. So again, this goes back to that cost sharing agreement that you were looking at from January 2023. My understanding is we're billing, I believe it's monthly, but we still need to, now that we understand the intricacies of these different agreements, we can now start asking some of those questions to make sure that there are no gaps in what we've received from the member municipalities. So that's what we're identifying here, is that we still have a bit of work to do to identify and make sure that we've received everything that we're entitled to. And that's certainly one of the pieces of closing out our contractual obligations.
Okay, so those answers and that question left unanswered will be answered in the report back when it comes back in 2024. Okay, good to know.
Do we have a ballpark of what we might expect to get back? Is it small or big?
I know legally sometimes we're advised not to guess, because then if other municipalities are guessing, they know publicly what we're expecting, and if we're expecting just a little, they'll aim that way. I'm just going to caution that because we've been warned in the past. Sorry, Councillor, didn't mean to.
Madam Chair, I was actually going to say, I don't want to venture a guess. I want to be able to do an assessment and then report back with the actual number.
Okay, so Councillor Stevenson, I still have other speakers on the list in case, just for letting you go, and then I'm still collecting names for anyone else who wants on the list.
Okay, so you want me to do one more, or?
One more, and then Councillor Farah has something else.
When we hire consultants as the City of London and we sign contracts, what rules or anything do we follow in terms of office space or parking or whatever it is? Like, any concerns about like employee versus contractor type consultant contracts?
Mr. Feldberg or Mr. Mathers, if you
I'll
want
just
the
speak
question.
super
Yeah.
high level. I don't know if we have anyone from here from finance. So we do have our procurements of goods and services policy. It dictates how we go through any kind of a procurement process. And so it would highlight what would be able to be chargeable or not in those cases. But I can't answer specifically to the specific items that were mentioned there.
Okay, Counselor?
Follow up
Yep.
on that then. The consultant, were they hired to be a full-time, working full-time on this project, full-time hours?
To staff, if you know.
Through you, Madam Chair. So yes, they were. They were hired to be in lieu of a city staffer, and that was something that a few other member municipalities did, as opposed to bringing on a new budget ask and adding a staff member. They chose to go with consulting.
Thank you. Counselor Ferrer, you're next, and you're at 4 minutes and 8 seconds.
Thank you, through you. I won't take up too much time. I don't have any questions. I just realized that I did forget to put the motion on the floor. I do appreciate the fulsome debate that we've had. I feel like the actions that staff has taken and the responses that we've had have been very good, so I am prepared to move the motion.
Thank you for that, because as committee chair, I should have framed the conversation better with something on the floor that we were actually discussing this time. So the motion has been moved, as in the staff report. Looking for a seconder on it. Okay, I'll second it. And noting as well that the council update, the source of funding update will come in writing before council. That was verbal from staff, and we don't need to put it in here because we need it before council. Councillor Stevenson.
Thank you. Given the acknowledgement that, there was some project management not best practices and, concerns about some of the finances, was it discussed at all to have put this under the management audit or internal audit to do a value for money on this so that we can get best practices going forward?
To any staff who would want this one?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So as part of the internal auditing process, we all, as the senior managers, have an opportunity to put in suggestions. We do have a suggestion in there that was before actually all of this came about, and it was very much focused on value for money for the construction of housing units for affordable housing, and just to ensure that our processes. So that was what we put into that process. It's up to council if they would like to have this reviewed. This is, in my thoughts, a kind of an outlier of a project. We've had many audits that have focused on technology and provided best practices back to us. You'd be likely to see that they would say you should do your best practices. However, it would be up to council if they want to have a different direction. What we put forward is just actually focusing on the actual housing units.
Thank you. Councillor?
Thank you. If council wanted to do that, what would be the process?
To staff?
Yes, Madam Chair, at the audit committee, when there's a review of the upcoming audit plan, that would be the place to table in addition to that plan.
Thank you for that. Councillor Stevenson?
Given the questions and some of the answers, I was hoping to add a couple of things to this report. I sent an email because there's nothing on here saying that there'll be a report back on the total financial costs, knowing that we're not stopping them right now. The costs are going into 2024. So I'm suggesting we add a D, that civic administration report back on the financial costs by municipality and the total cost. And E, that they report back on the monies collected and the details on any that remain uncollected, which would just be reporting back on what's already going to be done.
Okay, we're just looking to see if you had a seconder for that. Okay, Councillor Rahman's the seconder. We're just going to put it up. Did you give it to staff beforehand? Okay, so the clerk is clerking. We're going to put it up, and then we can go to staff once they've had a chance to see it in writing to see if this also ties into their part of the report, or that civic administration will validate all amounts owing from other municipalities and ensure that they have been voiced and collected, if that's incorporated in this or contrary, or that everything's in alignment with what we can actually do. So we'll just wait a moment for this to get up. Okay, if you refresh your systems, it's up, and it's up on the screens in chambers. okay, that item has been moved and seconded, so going to staff to see if this wording, I don't want to say works, because you do as directed by council.
absolutely.
But if it's part of the reporting system, if this information is possible to come back with, and if that ties into the direction you were already given within your write-up.
Absolutely. Through the chair, and no problems with what's been requested here. We're happy to bring that forward, and whatever information we have available from the different municipalities, that's what we'll be able to present to you.
Okay, and that still can be done within the same timeline with your formal report, and it comes back in once, not, okay, perfect. So Councilor, you're satisfied with that? Looking for ideally a concise discussion on anything of this, realizing some of us are close to our end time. Like, just, I'll still let you go more, but. Okay, any questions on this? Okay, so this is one of those D and E. I have no speakers on my list of voting on this, and then we will get to the main motion as amended that would incorporate D and E should it pass. Okay, so calling the question on the added amendments for D and E.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Perfect, so now we have A through E on the floor. Okay, so since it's a new vote, I need a new mover and a seconder. Councilor Ferrer is willing to maintain, and so is Councilor Rahman. Perfect. So as amended, looking for any further speakers. Okay, calling the question.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. That concludes our consent items. We have no scheduled items, no items for direction, deferred matters and additional business, because we do have a confidential item still to deal with tonight too. Councilor Stevenson, a deferred matter or additional business?
Well, under deferred matters, I've spoken to staff regarding getting the financial data for the winter response. And I understand it's coming to the December 5th report, but I just wondered if there was, I guess I was hoping it was going to come in this one so that it would be relevant before the cold weather response. But I guess maybe if there'd just be a comment as to why we're waiting until December for that.
Okay, just 1 second. So that's coming December 5th, looking at staff to see if that's on track, as I don't have a deferred matters list on this agenda attached to it that could be connected to. I'm told that deferred matters list will come to us quarterly. So looking at staff for, are we on track for that? Is this one our last caps before that meeting?
It was just recently passed, so I get that it's really, really close, but I was just wondering, given the relevance with the winter response and the funding and the contracts, sort of why we have to wait till December.
Yeah, so I'm going to ask the clerk if there's a deferred matters list that this would be referenced to. Because if not, it's emergent business, in which case it's coming anyway. So just going to staff with some leeway of, is it still coming on the 3rd, to answer the question the best you can? And if we go further from there, I'll be seeking clerk advice.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, we received the, on the council resolution that came out Wednesday. It said that staff are directed to report back at a future CAPS meeting with the information. That's exactly what we're doing. We're coming to we couldn't hit this cycle. We just had the council meeting on this topic. So the council resolution was received Wednesday. We're coming to the next available CAPS meeting, December 5th.
Okay, thank you. So it's coming just past. Looking to see if there's anythings, as we do have confidential session. Are we just gonna stay here? Okay, so we're gonna stay here. For anyone viewing, the view will pause and then resume, as we will resume from public session. Any staff that's not related to this matter, please take your leave and enjoy your evening. Anyone who needs to stay, please stay. Just one moment as we secure chambers. Oh, moving into closed session, moved by Counselor Rahman, seconded by Counselor Ferreira. All in favor? Counselor, voting's open in your system.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. As we resume in public session, looking for a motion to conclude this meeting of the Community Protective Service Committee. Motion to adjourn moved by Counselor Stevenson. Report out that, do you want to report out, Counselor Rahman?
Thank you. I would like to report that progress has been made on the matters by which we went in camera for.
Perfect, and that progress concludes our business of CAPS. Motion to adjourn moved by Counselor Stevenson, seconded by Counselor Rahman. A hand vote of all in favor of adjournment. The clerk says it's carried. Wishing you all a wonderful evening. Thank you.